These are a fantastic pair of gilded dragons. They've sat on top of a beautiful gilded pelmet or elaborate curtain rod in the centre room lobby in Buckingham Palace for some time. They were originally made for the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, and we have this pair, and Brighton Pavilion has another pair, but you can see in watercolours of the room that there were many more, and these four are the only ones that survive. The dragons came into the workshop because they were taken down as part of the larger Reservicing Programme at Buckingham Palace. When they came into the workshop, they had a green and gold gilding scheme to match the pelmets that they sit on in the centre room lobby. The gilding was in very poor condition, so the initial plan was that I would remove this layer of gilding, make the necessary repairs to the structure and the surface, and then re-gild them in green and gold as they were before. When I started cleaning them, I uncovered a completely different decorative scheme underneath this later layer of gilding. And that meant we ended up having quite a complicated treatment for the pair. So this is some of the original glaze on his neck here. And you can see they did this really clever thing of applying the glaze in layers so that you'd have a thin swipe of translucent color and it gets darker towards the bottom to really emphasize the depth of the shadow. Once I had uncovered these glazes, the plan was to remove all of the later layers of gilding, carefully expose all of those original glazes, and then gild over them in green gold. And then finally, I would selectively remove my new gold over the glazes to get the original glazing effect back. This worked for the first dragon. However, when I started working on the second dragon, I found that the original glazes were missing entirely. There were tiny traces of them, but they had mostly been scrubbed away. So for the second dragon, once I had re-gilded it, I had to apply entirely new glazes to match the surviving scheme on the first dragon. Most of the work I had to do on the dragons was to do with preparing them for re-gilding, but I did have to make a few things. Most of their teeth were either missing or broken. You can see on one of them I have gilded the teeth, but this one I haven't gilded them yet. And you can see I've had to number them because they all fit a specific slot. So a couple of weeks ago, His Majesty the King came to visit the workshop and we actually got a little help from him. He managed to gild one of the fangs on the dragon, and it's that one up front, so you know, if he wants to, he can point it out to people. The claws were in even worse shape than the teeth, and you can see here there's only one surviving claw out of both dragons. So I've had to make an entirely new set of claws, and like the teeth, I've had to number them so they all fit in the right place. These are original replacements, so somebody else had replaced them, and then I've made these. And they will be the very last things that I will put back, because as I'm working on them, I move the dragons around quite a lot, and I don't want to accidentally snap off my new claws once I've put them on. So we're not sure exactly when they were gilded green and gold to match the pelmets, but even when they were living at the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, they underwent quite a few modifications because the rooms were constantly being redecorated and redesigned. And you can see evidence of that in the dragons themselves. When I was taking off all of those later layers, we found all sorts of things in addition to all the paint. And one of my favorite things is we found a lot of alternative fixing points. So we normally would have these mounted horizontally like this, but we found this gigantic hole underneath. And if you use that as a fixing point, it gives them this really sort of dramatic swooping action, which I really quite like. And a lot of people look at this and think that that's probably how they were meant to be seen because they look so dramatic. but if you look at it with the carver's eye, it looks like the tops of the wings were never really meant to be seen. And you can tell that because there's all sorts of details that don't really make sense. So all of these ribs, I mean, this one just kind of turns a sharp corner and then terminates. It's kind of a mess over here. This is also a little bit confused. And if you compare that to the underside of the wings, it's much more thought through. They've really planned how the wing structure works. They've really given it a lot of thought. So that tells us that probably the people who were carving it didn't think the tops of the wings were going to be visible. So probably it was supposed to be seen like this, with the underside of the wings visible. So in this orientation, we actually have a watercolor that shows them holding a lantern in their mouth. So that's probably what this extra hole was drilled for, and there's even a little ring inside his mouth, and that probably took the weight of the lantern. When the dragons are finished, they're going to be put back on their pelmets in the center room lobby at Buckingham Palace. So it's been really fantastic working on these. I've become quite attached to them, and it's been just a joy watching them come to life and seeing all these colors come back.